Hey guys, Sutton here again. Today's tip has to do with when you shouldn't be doing your mobility exercises or static stretching. So first off, I hope you're all doing your mobility exercises. Most of you I know need it. Some of you probably don't, but most of you do. But one thing I want to talk about is being careful not to static stretch or overstretch a muscle that's going to be used, in the same training session. So a good way of doing things that I like to do it is to try to pair, say, upper body mobility on lower body lift days and vice versa. So work on lower body mobility on upper body lift days. It's a good way of doing it because you've rested from the day before, you haven't overstretched anything that you've worked out at the current time. It's a good time to increase that mobility again. So I think that works personally really well. So one reason that we don't want to static stretch a muscle, while we're going to work it, let's take the hamstrings for instance. So we don't want to be going into, leg lifts over our head or anything crazy like that, say before we deadlift or, an RDL, any type of hip dominant movement. I'm going to show you an example using my hands why we don't want to do this. So I'm going to take my hands like this. So think of my hands as a sarcometer. So that's part of your muscle. And think of my fingers as the actin, myosin, filaments. So when our muscles at rest like this, this is where we have our biggest contraction power. This is where we are our strongest, right? So think of my fingers, like I said, as the filaments that come together in a contraction. So your muscle works like this. It comes together, contracts, comes back to its resting length, contracts, back to its resting length. So when we static stretch it, before we're going to use it, what we do is kind of pull it apart. So now we've stretched it like this. So now when we need it to contract, it has trouble getting back together like this. So these actin myosin filaments use what are called cross bridges. So those are basically my fingers overlapping. So if my finger's out like this, there's not much overlapping, right? So it can't pull itself to contract right. When I'm at resting length like this, my fingers are overlapping a lot more, so there are more cross bridges. So that's where we can get that strong contraction, resting length, contract, like that. So moral of the story is just be careful when you're doing your mobility drills not to overstretch a muscle that you're about to use.